My work is primarily based in Basel at the very northwestern tip of Switzerland, a so-called tri-state city. Basel is something of a gateway city to the oceans of the world via the River Rhine, and it is defined as much by its relationship to the border nations of France and Germany as its distinction from them. In Basel, I direct the art space called Salz, which isn't the focus of my talk, but I welcome questions at the end. My subject of my talk is Parcours, a large-scale annual sculpture project I've curated since 2016. Parcours is devised as a parallel program to Art Basel and takes place throughout Basel's historic center. You actually see about the whole range where it takes place between the central bridges in Basel. It's about a 2-3 kilometer strip. Misconceptions of Parcours. Those who haven't visited Parcours tend to describe it as an outdoor sculpture project in the city. However, it's much more than this. Working alongside city departments, we collaborate with city museums, all of whom co-host Parcours projects. In addition, we have a policy of open invitation for any venue willing and able to share their space to approximately 10,000 plus visitors when they welcome them through their doors over a period of 7 days. Parcours is a platform for established as well as emerging talent, and it is dedicated to developing new ways of engaging with the city through artistic commissions and projects. It is also a project that negotiates access to the more cloistered parts of the city. For example, by opening up a museum storage, the attic, hidden spaces, rarely made public. It is for this reason that I also presented 19 indoor projects and just 3 outdoor projects in the year 2018 edition. The aim of this was to counter expectations of public sculpture as an outdoor enterprise. Just a few examples of the cliches of a outdoor sculpture show. Our Way, the Iron Tree, a flooded house by Rinus van der Velde in the construction and traffic department, where people worked on a daily basis from 8 to 5 in the day. Private house, where we were able to access an interior court that's never visible and put this very finely balanced Bernard Venet, just metal I-beams that are just in balance with each other, so they're not attached to each other, each weighing about over a ton. Nathalie Djurberg and Hans Berg, located in the oldest school gymnasium in Basel that's still active, so they lent us one of their classrooms. Virginia Overton, who made her task to take apart a pickup truck that she bought secondhand outside of Basel and reassembled it as kind of almost like a bouquet of flowers in the back of the flatbed. Later, the Whitney Museum bought it for their collection. Thomas Strutt, Animals, a very surprising project as well that went inside an old church after not finding a classical room to just exhibit photographs against the wall, and then to our surprise, he was fascinated by the architecture and curated a music program along with hanging these photographs from the ceiling beams and made a very meditative space. Pierre Bismuth, just in this year's edition, hanging a range of flags, country flags, always 2 superimposed with each other to make kind of a new third reading of a flag. Involving some 20 outdoors and indoor site-responsive projects, Parcours invites galleries and the artists to temporarily install artworks at selected sites throughout the historic center. The purpose of which is to engage in strategic and subtle ways with the city's cultural and socio-historical makeup. Parcours invites artists to roam relatively free within a 2 square kilometer urban area and challenge common perceptions about art in public. We invite artists to respond to charged sites and civic heritage, buildings and services. A close analog for Parcours is something like the Münster Skulpturenprojekte, just on a smaller scale, or the Rotterdam Outdoor Sculpture Initiative, except Parcours has a time frame of 1 week only and is integrated in the week's fair schedule. When I received the invitation to speak about art in the public realm, my immediate thoughts were about the publicness of art and who is in the position to define that relation. If the open-air museum took off in the post-war era in a bid to democratize the hallowed halls of the cultural institution, I wonder how this typology might be reconceptualized in the context of diminishing public space. Rather than getting stuck on a private public impasse, I want to focus on three things: audience, border, route, which I hope I will contribute to this debate from an alternative angle. Parkour consistently attempts to challenge the stability of these three terms. Parkour, approximately translated as course or journey, evokes a derive through Basel City Center. And even though parkour is 10 years old and my 5th year as a curator handling it, new spaces are sought to respond to and new routes are drawn each year. It is a generative way of presenting an artist's work outside of the usual parameters of the art fair. Locating parkour in the city itself means that people without an Art Basel ticket can freely access city institutions and other host spaces or wander on their own pace. By utilizing the city as an exhibition space, the project thus draws a wide set of audiences. The imperative to open doors works both ways. City officials and museum colleagues gain additional traffic in museums, while an artist project conceived in a private property will temporarily redraw the private-public field. A kind of shaking up ensues, and as a consequence, museum directors have been known to rethink their mission statement and what is recommended for their institutions. City residents who pass by an artwork, perhaps on their way to work, face familiar coordinates with fresh eyes. Beyond the institution, outdoor sculpture is exposed to a range of publics who will not necessarily acknowledge the work of art. They might mistake it for something else or miss it completely. So creating new routes and access points slows down our automized manner of circulating spaces. Sculpture in the public realm signals the definition of space insofar that it highlights some of the ways in which space is zoned and occupied. This is at odds with the illusion of wild nature or solid master planned cities. Rather, it brings attention to the evolving ownership and the management of sites. This is where parkour is truly exciting. Leading questions here are: how can art reframe space? How may an artwork engage with a highly operative environment? How can new orientations break apart the familiar for something else? What does what else do? Despite its duration only that of the Art Basel Week, these questions are significant for the city and the role of art therein. Typically, outdoor sculpture is commissioned when it can be adequately cared for and maintained by an acting body. Not only does this demonstrate an investment in an environment, but it affirms cultural heritage. In the city of Basel, where space is increasingly economized, it is an ever-growing challenge to store, preserve, and maintain public artworks. Culture departments are less inclined to allocate funding to the invisible public services of an artwork maintenance and more inclined to organize public events, symposia, or socials which can contribute to the goal of attendance figures. This is usually my answer when somebody asks, why does the city of Basel not buy one of these public artworks? Why don't they keep the Ai Weiwei tree on the church's square? Or this museum should acquire particular work for their collection once the week is over. The rationale of a temporary sculpture exhibition then is perhaps surprising. Artists involved can engage freely with unique environments without having to contemplate long-term preservation or cave under sales pressure or other permit restrictive limitations a city has to go through. Between creative freedom and the liberty to present new and challenging works to the city of Basel, parkour continuously attempts to bridge new paths and audiences through recognition of the evolving conditions of public sculpture. In 1854, Johann Jakob Imhof, a member of the board of the Basler Künstlergesellschaft, the Basel Society of the Arts, founded in 1812, established a ferry service across the Rhine of Basel. It was decided among the group that profits would be used to finance the building of a clubhouse and an art gallery. In 1864, upon the merger of the two societies, the Basler Künstlergesellschaft and the Basler Kunstverein, which also had a little bit of revenue at their disposal, sufficient money was finally available to purchase a site. A little later, enough funds were generated for a building that became the Kunsthalle Basel as we know it today. I offer this as a historical detail for how it reveals a desire for connection deep in the bedrock of Basel. Today, Basel has a number of bridges spanning the Rhine. The middle bridge from the early 12th century is one of the oldest Rhine bridges. The second Rhine bridge, the Wettstein Bridge, is considerably younger, having been opened to traffic since 1879. Before this, it was the ferry service, the Harzgraben ferry, that provided passage across the river. A means of passage established by artists and their patrons. A public service that not only served a crucial civic function, but illustrates an enduring codependency of art and public life. That it was an artist society raising revenue through a civic entity and not public officials calling artists to generate cultural value, demonstrates integrity in the face of ongoing disputes about the public value of art. For Parcours 2018, the American artist Jessica Stockholder contributed a set of assist sculptures, works designed to be attached to civic furniture such as gates and staircases, the dragon mascot of Basel, or simply the crooked riverbeds along the Rhine. Working in symbiosis with their environment, the sculptures, 3 squared on the riverbank, prompted the redrawing of boundaries and that of the logistics of mutual dependencies across city factors, human and non-human. Somewhat ironically, the project proved much more difficult to realize than anticipated. The attachment of artworks to an existing infrastructure threw up many legal access and security constraints. Covering the floor where someone could trip over an unforeseen edge or texture was a no-go, while the risk of damage to wild plants growing along the water's edge turned into weeks of heated debate with the city gardening, traffic and construction departments, as well as police officials. In this example, the city clearly showed its resistance to being reconceptualized, or at least it would oblige on its own terms via a corridor of protocols. Nevertheless, we prevailed. The artists installed their sculptures at 3 different locations. The idea was that between the locations, one would acquire a sense of material evolution. The first was installed flat on the wall of the Rhine's waterbed, and the next folding itself over the border's edge. Another was placed at the top of the bridge, extended outward in 3-dimensional form, as if it was emerging from the previous 2 and embracing the bridge's pillar. The total effect was kind of a parasite presence in the city, comprehensive and unnervingly discreet depending on what was sought out. The sculptures were supported by the city insofar as they physically mapped onto existing structures. They also cheekily reversed the expectation of sculpture as easily transportable. Standalone monuments varied from expo to expo. Oops, sorry. You Have Left the American Sector, a work originally conceived in 2011, is a work by the Vancouver-based artist Ron Terrada. For Parcours, Terrada chose the foot of Mittlerer Brücke as its location. It is one of the earliest bridges constructed on the Rhine, as we said before, in 1226, and key to the development of long-distance cross-border trading routes. Terrada's sculpture is part of an ongoing series with title, text, and materials adapted from the original Checkpoint Charlie sign at the east-west Berlin border, referring to post-war divisions of political territory and the ongoing implications of social and geographical divisions. In each iteration, the English text is paired with a translation in a second language, particular to its place of production or exhibition. Originally, this piece was commissioned for the MCA Chicago. The work uses Illinois state signage facilities with text in English and Spanish as the predominant second language in the United States. For Basel, the question posed was, does it make sense to translate the sign using Swiss signage and German and French text, the 2 primary languages in Switzerland? Conceptually, the work would have allowed this adaptation, and the artist was willing to consider it. But holding on to these lost signifiers made the sign's relocation to Basel even more of a poignant signpost. Terrada's work at Parcours encouraged audiences to move anachronously across divergent time periods from the 1980s to 2019. Geographic territories, Germany and Switzerland. Looking beyond the Rhine is actually already, the horizon is already within the German territory. Historical context and languages. It examined the project of a nation building through and as distinct from codependent or allied nations, as staged within Switzerland's long-held policy of political neutrality. By parachuting in a frightened signifier such as this, Terrada queried the very rationale for the nation-state, the imperative to protect one's borders. Terrada also highlights on a separate debate division on a local scale. This is the historical fight between the Gross Basel, the big part of Basel, the affluent, largely middle-class area of Basel, where the Terrada piece was located, and the small Basel, as we call it, comprised mainly of working class immigrant communities across the Rhine. In this contemporary moment of global social and political upheaval, we are asked to consider the greater picture of mass migration and the implications of the increasingly antiquated concept of national borders. Border anxiety has become a flashpoint in sovereignty and refugees debates. Terrada's artwork stages a semantic history of division and rule in Basel, the result of which actively muddles our understanding of geopolitical context, territory, and time. The very logics borders rely on for assertion. The work also highlights how sculpture passes across temporal and geographical borders more freely than humans. Art across borders. In 2016, the German artist Tobias Leuenberger completed the 24-stop walk, the Leuenberger walk, Weg called. A sculpture walk connecting Fondation Baylor in the Swiss village of Rien to the Vitra campus in Weil am Rhein in Germany. The walk is punctuated by a series of 24 colorful waymarkers that have been installed along the route to guide audiences. Beginning in front of the Fondation Baylor, the walk crosses a river before winding through backcountry and various orchards, eventually arriving at the industrial campus in the vicinity of Frank Gehry's Vitra Design Museum, where a fluorescent bell marks the end of the route. In doing so, walkers move between municipalities as well as across national border. Not unlike the Hartskram ferry, the Leuenberger Werk was born of a desire to connect zones regardless of material borders. Here, however, it is the social capacity of art that are recognized as social mobility. Indeed, the project was conceived under the umbrella of IBA Basel 2020, an initiative that aims to strengthen the connection between Germany, France, and Switzerland at its borders and carries the motto, growing together in a tri-national state. At the Swiss-German border, which coincides with a stop number, the tram number 10 goes all the way to the border, identity documents must be produced before continuing. In this way, the project strives for, with a good dose of optimism, art beyond borders, an action that simultaneously draws attention to both literal and de facto borders are maintained. If walking relies on a right of way and when passing the border by a car is increasingly automated, this optimized tri-national relationship directs our attention to the conditions by which borders are traversed. The people of Basel proudly present an international image through this tri-state relationship, while keeping in place an architecture of close monitoring. In the example of Stockholder's contribution, conventions of space and borders are unseated by sculptures that deliberately invade the law of bounded relations. Stockholder work remapped the social as well as what could live in public. To make public, then, is an evolving exercise not simply reserved for centralized or open spaces. As the routes drawn by the Herzgraben ferry and the Leuenberger Werk demonstrate, focusing on mutual dependencies can generate new outlines for experience and habitation. With this return, I now look at how a citywide sculpture project like Parcours challenges the idea of public as a given right. Publicness excludes and includes certain bodies, things, and property. By opening up new doors and passive in the city, Parcours is committed to probing and remapping the borders of everyday life, giving as much of the creative reins to artists as possible. Within the following case study, I bring my talk to a close. A powerful project was staged for Parcours in 2018 by the artist Wu Zhang. Zhang's The Secret Life of Things provided public access to the library and smoking room of the members club, Club de Bal. The lifting of boundaries served as an additional purpose, opening a portal to an underground event that centered queer experience and sociality. What began as a site visit of the artist moved into a discovery of the history of the house that Club de Bal operates from. This then snowballed into a three-part project of epic proportions. It is a leading example of how Parcours works across both enclosed and public arenas. Club de Bal, usually a members club, thus suspended their exclusive rights and granted access to a network of artists, musicians, and friends. In order to preserve the social intentions of the artist, the event wasn't advertised through Art Basel, but passed by word of mouth. With this, Zhang challenged the exclusive protocol of the members club while keeping its infectious channels of communication, gossip. Through Zhahn's project, Club de Ball achieved a rare thing of an open yet safe place. Wu Zhang's work engages collaboration as subject and method. At the center of The Secret Life of Things was a library of sorts, as you see in the image, composed of fragments of an ongoing collaboration with poet and theorist Fred Moten. The club became an interstitial space, a portal to secret performative events happening throughout the week in the subterranean lower level. Zhang also curated her own artistic program, which culminated in a live performance as part of the Martinskirche with the ensemble Moved by Motion, who coincidentally now became the new directors at the Schauspielhaus in Zurich. While the idea of peeking inside the lives of the rich and famous is time-worn, the suspension of business as usual provides generative and open out the space to different use and occupation. The club from outside with different levels. With each iteration of parkour, next year being the 50th year anniversary of Art Basel, new audiences, borders and routes are teased and carved out. One of the most enjoyable parts of parkour is surprising the artists who often do not realize the impact of their projects until they arrive for a site visit. The idea about where an artistic intervention can take place are so often predetermined, and even more so with established artists who know the rules of engagement best. Supporting artists to break these do's and don'ts is the most refreshing element of this walk through the city. Thank you very much.